A restaurant server placed the wrong order at my table with a note saying, "Take the girl and leave now." I wasn't even supposed to be at Meridian's that night. My original dinner plans had fallen through when my client canceled last minute, leaving me with a 7 p.m. reservation I almost didn't keep. But something about the idea of going home to an empty apartment and leftover Chinese food felt unbearable, so I drove downtown anyway, telling myself I deserved a proper meal after the week I'd had. The server who approached my table moved like someone walking through a minefield. She was young, maybe 19, with the kind of nervous energy that comes from carrying secrets too heavy for your shoulders. When she set down the chicken parmesan, I definitely hadn't ordered. Her hands were shaking so badly the plate rattled against the table. "Excuse me," I started to say, but she was already walking away, moving too fast for someone supposedly delivering the wrong order. That's when I noticed the folded napkin tucked beneath the plate, the edges torn like someone had ripped it from the dispenser in desperation. The handwriting was all capital letters, pressed so hard into the paper that the ink had bled through to the other side. My heart started hammering as I read the words again. "Take the girl and leave now." The urgency in those 5 words made my mouth go dry, but when I looked around the elegant dining room, everything appeared normal. Soft jazz piano, clinking wine glasses, the usual Friday night crowd of business dinners and date nights. Then I saw her, the little girl at the table directly behind me, sitting between 2 men in expensive suits like a prisoner flanked by guards. She couldn't have been more than 7, with dark hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, wearing a dress that was too formal and too big for her small frame. What made my stomach drop was how still she sat, like she'd been trained not to move or speak. The men were deep in conversation about numbers and schedules, their voices carrying that particular tone of people discussing business transactions. One was older, maybe 50, with silver hair and a Rolex that caught the restaurant lighting every time he gestured. The other looked younger but harder, with the kind of predatory stillness that made my skin crawl even from several feet away. "The client wants the package delivered Monday instead of Wednesday," the younger one was saying, checking his phone. "Can we accommodate the schedule change?" Package. They were talking about this child like she was cargo to be shipped, and the casual cruelty in their voices made me feel sick. I pretended to study my phone while watching them, trying to understand what I was witnessing. The little girl hadn't touched her food, hadn't spoken, hadn't even lifted her head to look at the men beside her. Her hands were folded in her lap, and I could see her shoulders trembling slightly with each breath. The server reappeared at their table, moving with the same nervous energy I'd noticed before. As she refilled their water glasses, she leaned down close to the little girl and whispered something that made the child's head snap up. For just a moment, terrified dark eyes met mine across the restaurant, and I saw something that made my chest tight with rage. This child was silently screaming for help, and I was the only person in this room who seemed to notice. The server had somehow identified me as someone who might act, though I had no idea why. Maybe it was because I was dining alone, or maybe she'd seen something in my face when our eyes met earlier. Whatever the reason, she'd handed me a responsibility I couldn't ignore. The older man's phone rang, and his conversation became more animated as he discussed what sounded like logistics. "The transport leaves at midnight," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to overhear. "Everything needs to be ready for immediate departure. Transport, midnight departure." The pieces were falling together in a way that made me want to scream. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera app, pretending to take a selfie while actually recording their conversation. The younger man was nodding along, occasionally interjecting with comments about quality control and client specifications that made my skin crawl with their implications. "What about the other inventory?" the younger one asked, consulting what looked like a list on his phone. "How many units are ready for next week's shipment?" Units. They were talking about children like inventory in a warehouse, and what happened next changed everything. Full story is linked below or on my channel.